Hey guys, I'm Eugene Bach with Back to Jerusalem, and I'm coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of Dubai this time. I just wanted to take a really quick second to share with you that I believe that we are looking at something that is spectacular in this new generation that God is rising up. I say that because for the last 2 decades or more, I've been traveling around and speaking at different university campuses. I've had the privilege of speaking at some of the most well-known universities in all the world. In fact, next month, I'm going to be going to North Carolina, where I'll be speaking at the North Carolina State University, where they are going through the Chasing Revival series as a group of students together, which makes me so excited, especially since that Bible study was done for home groups, and we actually launched it at Princeton University. So this is something that is near and dear to my heart. I've been witnessing for a while, but in the last week, I've really seen something special. You know, I have had the opportunity to serve the Chinese underground house church between China and Jerusalem, and I just got back from a Middle Eastern nation. I can't really share where I've come back from, but I had a young man from England who, believe it or not, gave his heart to Christ a few years ago at a Back to Jerusalem missions meeting. We weren't even doing evangelizing or trying to see people saved. And yet this young man just felt God moving inside of his heart and gave his heart to Christ. And he's been following Back to Jerusalem very passionately for the last couple of years, reading every book. Every time I go and I speak at his church, he makes himself known. And I just see that he's been volunteering for everything and anything that has to do with Back to Jerusalem. And a few months ago, I get a phone call from one of our house church pastors that said, "Hey, we have a need from one of our churches in the Middle East." And so I reached out to the church in the Middle East and I talked with them, and it sounded like they needed an English teacher right away, ASAP. Now, trust me, I know that, there should be preparation for people that are going to the mission field. I know that there should be education for people going to the mission field, whether it's language, cross-cultural missions, missiology, theology. I mean, I have my doctorates in theology, so I know a little bit about something when it comes to education for the mission field. But I just love seeing young people who are willing to abandon everything for the gospel. And that's what I saw. Something told me that I need to give this opportunity to this young man. So I ran it through the office director, and they enthusiastically recommended this young man to go to the mission field. He's only 19 years old. And so we presented an opportunity to him. And this is where it gets interesting. And this is where so many people miss the mark. So many people feel like they need to be prepared. They need certain information. It's just irresponsible and dumb to leave out without certain information, right? So this 19-year-old, we present to him the opportunity to go and teach English with Chinese underground house church missionaries who are living and serving in a closed country in the Middle East. And he said yes. He said yes before he knew any details. And so I sat down with him and just explained to him that we don't know where you're going to be living. We don't know what your living situation is going to be. We don't know who you're going to be teaching or for how long. We do not have any money that we can pay you to do this. Are you still willing to do it? He said, yes. He quit his job, got rid of his car, got rid of everything, and showed up on the mission field. I met with him to take him to the closed country. He showed up with one small carry-on bag, and he's going to be living there for at least 6 months, if not for the rest of his life. But God prepared. The servant heart that showed up and said, "Lord, here am I, send me," showed up with nothing else. And just a heart. And I know that there's so many Christians that will criticize this. And I know that there are reasons why this is a bad idea. And I know that I'm encouraging bad behavior. But guys, I have to tell you, there is something exciting when you abandon everything into God's hands for God to make the plans for you. There is something exciting when you are being led by the Holy Spirit and you don't know. There's something exciting about not having control over a situation. I feel like there's something equally exciting about meeting, seeing, and serving with individuals who quite notably feel that they are unworthy. They don't feel like they're old enough, experienced enough, educated enough, wealthy enough. They didn't come with enough resources. I didn't ask this young man how much money he had in his bank. I'm assuming it was nothing. From the information that he was telling me about his most recent weeks, I didn't get the impression that he had a large savings. He said some family members gave him some pounds before he left, and I asked him how much, and it sounded like they gave him 200 pounds. For all I know, that's all he had in his wallet. And before I left him, I gave him 100 euros. So he had just over $300 at best. And he's going to be living for the rest of his life in this area, or maybe, who knows? So I dropped him off and I met with the Chinese there, and I kind of handed over the package. I literally wrote to the office director from where he came and said, package is delivered. And when I met with the Chinese, something exciting began to happen. All of us sat in a room, and there's more than 60 back to Jerusalem Chinese living in the area. And we began to ask them, what do you need help with? By the way, this is the first time that I even know what exactly it is that they need help with. I had assumptions, and I shared my assumptions with the young man who left. But to be honest, my assumptions were wrong, as they usually are. But he just had such a servant heart, and he was ready to go. And that was exciting to see. So he shows up, and then the 60 Chinese back to Jerusalem missionaries that were there said, hey, listen, we are working with young people here in this nation that are not getting the kind of education that they're hoping for. Many of them are being torn apart because of war. Many of them are suffering poverty because of war and violence in their area. And they want a better opportunity for themselves and their children. They've asked us to teach them English, but we don't speak English. That's another thing that was very interesting. I left this young man who only speaks English with a group of Chinese who speak no English to work together with people that he has to teach English because they also don't speak English. You see the challenges there? This sounds like a bad idea all around, but we watch as God provided. My first translator there was a young Chinese girl, the daughter of Chinese back to Jerusalem missionaries. She was 9 years old. She became the translator for him. Her English was phenomenal. She won a national level English contest for her age, but wasn't able to go on to the next level because her parents were too poor to send her to the next level of competition. But her English was phenomenal. And she began to speak to me. She said she speaks Arabic, Chinese, English, and French. Arabic being her strongest second language, and I could hardly believe my ears because her English was amazing. For a 9-year-old, she speaks 4 languages. God is blessing them. And as we're sitting down, and you've got these 60 back to Jerusalem missionaries that are gathered around, they began to talk with this young man and say, we have these local people that are coming to us asking for someone to speak English, and we just need a local, someone that speaks English as their native language to be able to teach them English. The 19-year-old has not been trained to be a teacher. He hasn't been trained to run a course or run a class. He was given some makeshift materials that we provided to him from other English courses that we have conducted in the past. And so he's going to be working off of those with no experience, but he is a native speaker. And he said, Lord, here am I, send me. And he got sent. So he says, yes, I can teach them. And the Chinese were so excited. And then they looked at each other, and they looked at the translator, and they asked Would it be possible for you to also teach us and our children? We don't have anybody here to teach us and our children. Our children all go to local school where they speak Arabic and they need assistance. Would you be able to assist them? He said, yeah, absolutely. And they said, great. So now he has a student list. He has a target audience, and he has a background that I believe God prepared specifically for this place and time. How long will he be there? I don't know, but it gets even better. You see, I then asked the Chinese with a bit of fear and trembling and trepidation, where will this young man sleep? My assumption was that he would probably share space with one of the Chinese missionaries who live in very small spaces. Many of them share apartments, more than one family to a one-bedroom apartment. And they've lived like that for a while. I've been working in the Middle East for quite a while. In the area where they are working in, I could see that, this was something that would be a big sacrifice for them, to share space with a foreigner. Why? Because oftentimes there is this honor that is given to missionaries. And even though they too are missionaries, they feel obligated as the host, even though it's not their country. They feel obligated as the host to be good host to this foreigner who came and joined them for missions. And so I asked them with a little bit of anxiety, where will this young man live? And they said, you see, if you would have asked us this 2 days ago, we would not have been able to answer. But God has provided. They told me a story about a Chinese businessman that had been looking for a place to live for a couple of months. When he finally found a brand new apartment, air conditioning, all furnishings, in a great area, a great neighborhood in the city, everything that you could want, this Chinese businessman got from his apartment. And then right after he signed the papers and paid for a 1-year lease on that apartment, he was called by his job and said, we need you to come back to China. We have a project that we need you to run for the next 12 months. And he already paid the 12-month deposit on this apartment. So he went to our Chinese missionary friends and he said, I have this apartment. Are there any missionaries that need this brand new, fully furnished apartment? Here are the keys. And they handed the keys over to this young man who's going to start off in a brand new apartment, all his own, that was provided for him only when he stepped out in faith. I'm reminded of the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua talks about how God called Joshua to finally take that generation of people that had been the children of those that died in the wilderness, that died in the desert. And he raises up this new generation that is led by Joshua. And Joshua chapter 1 tells us about the calling of Joshua. But Joshua chapter 2 and 3 goes into the war planning stages of the promised land. And God tells Joshua very clearly that he is to cross the Jordan River and to go into the area where God has promised. And what I love is that the Israeli people, the Jewish people, God's people, are told to march into enemy territory. They're not given any instruction other than I will provide. You will conquer. Everywhere you set your foot, I will give to you. The most amazing part of that story, in my opinion, is the splitting of the river. Everybody knows the parting of the Red Sea, but this is an event that is similar, just not often studied or shared about. And I feel in many ways it's more miraculous, because in the first splitting of the waters at the Red Sea, there you have desperation. You have an army that is chasing God's people. You have prayer and people that are scared and they are willing to do anything to escape death. And God at the last minute, like a nail biting novel that you've been reading or a Hollywood blockbuster, at the very last minute, God breaks open the Red Sea, parts the waters where the water is stacked on each side, and his people cross on dry land. And when the pursuing armies come after, the water comes in and destroys them. That is miraculous, no doubt about it. But in many ways, this is even more miraculous. Why? What we see in Joshua chapter 3 is not an army chasing God's people, but an army facing God's people. So instead of the water being a place where if I can get to the other side, I will make it to salvation. My life will be saved. I will make it away from the enemy. It's that, well, if I make it to the other side, I'm now going to be facing my enemy. And reports came back that the enemy they're giants. The reports came back during the days of Caleb and Joshua when they were spies in the land. Even though Joshua and Caleb had different reports, all the other spies said, these guys are huge. Their resources are massive and we have no chance against them. So I'm sure that part of the memory of those reports came and cycled throughout the people. And they didn't have entertainment. They didn't have radio. They didn't have newspapers. They didn't have TV. So I'm sure the gossip mill gave them plenty to build their imaginations on. So in this instance, the water, the river, was an excuse to not go. Hey guys, we really wanted to do God's will. We wanted to fight the enemy just like he told us, but we can't because there's water here and we can't really cross it now, can we? But God told them to do probably one of the most ridiculous war plans you've ever heard of in your life. Don't build boats. They were never given the command to build boats, to sneak over the river on boats in the middle of the night and conduct an ambush in the area of Jericho on the other side of the river, to conduct a night ambush after the troops first make it over on makeshift canoes or boats or whatever. No. Instead, God told his people to carry the ark, and that the warriors, the people that fight, the people that are armed, the people that are trained, the warriors go to the back of the priests. The priest would lead the way to a river that they can't cross. Remember, they grew up in the desert. They can't swim. So if they get in the middle of the river, the chances of them drowning are pretty much 100% because they can't walk across the river. So now you have the priests leading the way, carrying the ark, and told, just walk into the river. When your feet touches the river, then the river will part. They had to walk out. They had to step in faith. They had to start by carrying the ark. They had to start by putting the priest at the front. They had to start by giving praise and worship from the beginning and step out in faith. And only then did God move. Step out in faith. That's what this young man did. And we see that when the priest stepped into the river, the waters piled up. The water stopped. A wall was built and the people crossed over on dry land. But only when they did what God told them to do. They had no insurance plan. They had no future plan. They had no strategy that was laid out. They didn't have a manual to follow that said, this is going to be step 1. And I promise that step 2, this will happen. The stepping into the river and nothing stopping in the very beginning is going to be completely natural. Don't get scared. That is everything that was none of that. It was telling the priest who can't swim and are carrying a very heavy metal-laden ark, which is bound to sink. So not only can you not swim, you're carrying something that is going to pull you to the bottom, even if you could float to the top. Watching this new generation This young man, who I can't give his name or give any details about him, he's a part of a new generation, I believe. We are seeing so many people join the body of Christ in this generation. We are seeing a surge of people buying Bibles. We are seeing a surge of home groups and churches. We're even seeing a surge in the Eastern Orthodox Church in Europe and America and Canada. This is exciting, but I believe that there's a direct link between the surge that we are seeing with this new generation and the hunger for missions, the desire to take the gospel where it has never gone before. In the same trip, I flew to Asia, and I had with me a young man who's 18, 1 year younger, from Europe. And we had to go and provide training in Asia in a very remote area. This young man only knew what country he was going to because he had to get a visa beforehand. He didn't know where we were going. He didn't know what his role would be. He didn't know how long he would be there. He had no information. And he stepped out in faith. And he came with us to serve the underground church. He didn't know how he would serve. He didn't know even if he was equipped to serve. And he did something that most missiologists and most Christians and definitely most secular people would advise against. And guys, don't get me wrong. This kind of faith can be twisted and can be used against people and be used in a very dangerous way to take advantage of people. This kind of faith can also be used as an excuse for lack of preparation when you should be prepared. This type of faith can be used for the enemy to pollute and pervert and use to destroy people. But when you put yourself in God's hands and you don't try to control everything, and you don't try to write a handbook manual for everything that you do, and you don't try to get insurance plans and retirement plans and payment plans all set up in place before you do what God has called you to do, there is a beauty in it. There is something special in the sacrifice that it takes to step out into the waters while carrying the Ark of the Covenant and doing God's will. I've been watching this new generation for a while, and it excites me. And I'm excited to see how God is going to move. And what I am actually seeing, and I don't know, I'm not a great communicator, so I sometimes lack the words or lack the ability to communicate accurately. But I believe what I have been witnessing for more than 2 decades in China of a young church that is willing to go out and give everything for the gospel, that is somehow appealing to the church in the West as well. That is somehow lining up with that first original teaching that came to the first century church through Jesus himself as he sent out his disciples without worrying where they would sleep or where their money would come from, without worrying about preparing what they would say, just stepping out and doing what God has called his people to do. That's the generation I believe that we're living in. And it leads me to think that we could be in the end times where God is calling up his people and just saying what he said from the very beginning. One word, go. Go. How? Go. With what? Go. With who? What? Where? How? How much? Go. Go and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you so much for joining us for another Back to Jerusalem podcast. Again, I'm Eugene Bach, your host for this time, coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of Dubai. God bless you.